Hi everyone. A couple of weeks ago I went mudlarking in London and discovered some extremely interesting bits and pieces spanning several different centuries as usual. I also had the pleasure of spending some time on the foreshore with friend and fellow mudlark Ted Sandling, whose book you may have read, London in Fragments, A Mudlark's Treasures. Ted is extremely knowledgeable about the diverse types of pottery to be found on the foreshore, and so I didn't waste a moment quizzing him about some of my pottery shards. And I wish the pieces of pottery which I find on the foreshore could speak, to think of all the conversations they've witnessed while sitting on the kitchen table of a Roman family or the sideboard of a Tudor inn. Just imagine what they could tell us. It wasn't long before Ted and I were busily searching for pins and semi-precious stones. The time flew by and we found a lovely array of treasures. Thank you for joining me. Let's go and see what the Thames tide left out for us to find. I've just spotted an old-looking coin just here, which is very exciting indeed. I wonder what it is. I can't quite make it out. But that's rather beautiful. Take a closer look when I get home. See if we can identify it. It's very thin. Well, it's a windy and wet morning on the Thames foreshore, and I've come down early this morning to follow the tide out, and I've had the pleasure of bumping into Ted Sandling. Hi Ted.
Hi Nicola, how are you?
Fine, thanks. And Ted, as probably many of you know, because probably many of you have read his book, London in Fragments, and so this is pretty exciting, and this is a place I've not been before, and so Ted's going to show me around a bit.
Very excited to be showing Nicola around.
So when did you write your book again, Ted?
It came out in the winter of 2016. It's just come out in paperback now.
Excellent. Well, I will put a link to that book at the end of this video. So anyway, can't waste any more time. I'm going to go see if we can find anything.
Got some treasures to find.
You're done with that garnet?
Oh, sorry. I'm cleaning it.
Garnet, isn't that beautiful?
Yeah, so there are lots and lots of garnets to be found here, and it's a bit like finding pins. There are many of them hiding within the sand, and once you get your eye in, you can just find tens of them. We've not got our eye in
Oh,
yet.
there's a pin, I think.
Yeah, there's a pin.
There's a pin. Here it is, a little pin.
A little garnet.
And there are innumerable amounts of pins on the foreshore, aren't there?
Yeah, and they are lovely and addictive to pick up.
Yeah.
Because there are just so many, and they tend to cluster.
And why are there so many pins?
We've now got two garnets. So we will hopefully come back when we've got 20.
Okay, great. Well, let's get on and see if we can find some more. Have you found a garnet spot?
We found a better garnet spot. But you can see there, and look, they're all broken.
Beautiful little collection there.
Yeah, they're all.
Are they precious stones then? I've been very
semi-precious.
Semi-precious.
And here's one.
Oh, and
you
another
can actually use your, but they're all shattered. Usually you can, here's a nice pin which we can use for digging out the garnets.
Oh, wonderful.
We will start to find some that are the fully crystalline form, and those are very, very beautiful. So they've got these very nice facets.
Great, okay, well,
see.
I'm going to have a look and see if I can find one now. All these beautiful pins which you find on the foreshore, and they're from the 14th century onwards, really, until the Industrial Revolution. Women used to hold their clothes together with them, particularly in Tudor times. They used to be literally pinned together. down there is a round thing which could possibly be, I'm going to have to pick it up before the tide comes in, could possibly be some form of industrial thing, or it could be a coin. Let's hope. Oh no, I can definitely see Britannia on there. Very heavy and thick. Ah, and there is a profile there. Okay. My instincts are telling me George III. And I think that's 1797. I'll clean it up when I get home. Ted is definitely the go-to man for pottery, and I know really not a lot about pottery. What have you got there?
Well, I was just wondering if it could be an early floor tile, but it is so much of the glaze is lost that I'm not really sure that it's worth keeping.
Okay. Can you tell me
yes,
what these are?
Wow, look at those!
I'll try and do this.
So these are all bits of Delftware.
If you hold it up.
1, 2, 3, of course. Let's get it into...
Yeah.
So we have here an 18th century Delftware tile. So this is a wall tile.
Oh, 18th century Delftware
yeah, so
tile.
Georgian wall tile. You can see here this radius. It would have been a lovely circle. Possibly something nautical going on there. That might be a sail.
Oh, yeah.
So they have a little like a vignette, typically, of these two blue lines in a circle. And they're lovely and thin, and they would have covered walls. This is the base of a charger. You've got this wonderful cobalt blue again. It's earlier. It's early 18th century, 17th century. You've got wonderful orange.
I love
lines.
those colours.
I love Delftware beyond measure because it's just so tactile. You can see how thick the glaze is. And this is a slightly later, probably a dish you're getting from the curve of the base there. And again, you get these wonderful brushstrokes that are just exquisite. You can really imagine the artist painting these on. And what's very interesting with Delftware is the colours that they used didn't look like this when they were working with them. Cobalt was black, and orange was... I can't for the life of me remember what orange was. But they had to imagine what the finished colours were going to turn out with once they'd been fired. But they were working with completely different colours when they were painting these.
Brilliant. Oh,
these are great finds.
Thank you very, very much. Well, the tide is on its way in now, and we've got some beautiful finds. And again, I'm going to ask Ted to tell me a little bit about this pottery. If you could, Ted.
Absolutely. So it's been a very short mudlark before work this morning, but we've still found some absolutely beautiful things. My favourite of all this morning is this absolutely exquisite Westerwald piece. So this was made in Germany in the 17th century, probably. It's wonderful cobalt blue stoneware. You can see this sort of grey body. And the detail that they capture in the moulding is just exquisite. I'm trying to figure out if it's that way up and we've got an urn here, or if it's this way up and we've got a sort of festoons, almost like a peacock's tail here. Either way, gorgeous.
What would it have been used for?
This would have been a jug or a vase, probably. They could be very, very highly decorated. So, although this is rich in itself, there would have been many, many more of them. And I'm just going to pick these up because the tide's coming in.
Yeah, we're going to disappear with the tide.
Let's put these down in a nice brick.
Great.
So, beautiful vegetables.
Yeah.
Wonderful, I call as a sort of shorthand Tudor greenware, and there's a yellow to go with it. I've just found there's richer green too. So this is made with copper in the lead glaze earthenware. It's not necessarily made in the Tudor period, but it is sort of a shorthand to call it that. 2 tiny bits of porcelain. This is very delicate.
Oh,
if you
look
can
at
see
that.
it in profile, it's incredibly thin and rich colours.
And when's that from?
This is... Oops, lost. I don't know when this is. It's probably 17th or 18th century.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah,
really
it's
so
really,
delicate,
really nice.
isn't it?
And these are your finds,
Yes,
Nicola. Tell
yes.
us about these.
Well, this is apparently a George III cartwheel penny. Yes, I'm very happy with that. And a little pipe bowl. I do like my pipe bowls. So all in all...
So that's the 17th century pipe
Yes,
bowl.
that's 17th century, isn't it? I love the shape of this.
Yeah, and I love this milling that you get around the edges of.
Well, super. And of course, you can read more about all these bits of pottery in Ted's book. Can't you? London,
Certainly can. London in Fragments.
London in Fragments.
Sorry, I hadn't realised you were waiting for me to plug my book there.
Of course. Well, thank you very much, Ted.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It is always a pleasure to go mudlarking with you, Nicola.
Great. Thank you. And here's what looks like a candle holder, but I have no idea if it's old or not. Unfortunately, Ted has left now. I'll have to send him a photograph of it. Well, this area here, you can see a fair bit of fragments of Roman pottery. Particularly beautiful piece over here, look. Now, isn't that beautiful? Actually got a pattern on it. Just imagine that on some Roman family's dining table. That's my friends the swans. There's what looks like a tiny button just here, and again I can see that it's got some lettering or something on it, some kind of design, but can I see it? Get it wet, see if that works. I can't quite make it out. Oh, hang on, that's a bit clearer. Oh, now that looks like a crown, doesn't it? With an S and something. Okay, it's going to require further research. If anybody knows, please let me know. There's a beautiful piece of Benllermine here. And here is a piece of Benllermine with part of a beard on it from the man that is on the side of the Benllermine. I'm going to do a little roundup of the items featured in today's video, and I'm going to start with this 1797 George III cartwheel penny. I've cleaned it up a little bit. It's copper, and you can see George there. He's a little bit faded, but you can just make him out. And then on the other side, you can make out the date, 1797. It's very heavy and it's quite rugged and chipped almost around the edge, which I suppose is hardly surprising given the amount of time it's been subjected to the Thames tide over the years. And next is this token, which I originally thought was a coin, but it is in fact a post-medieval rose and orb Nuremberg jeton made by Hans Krauwinkel II, somewhere between 1536 and 1635. So it's a Nuremberg jeton, a form of token which was used in place of valuable coins to assist in accounting. And Nuremberg was a primary producer of cheap jetons, and Hans Krauwinkel came from a family of jeton makers. And here is my little pot of pins, probably dating back from the 14th century right up to the 1900s. They were used extensively by women and men alike every day, and there's thousands and thousands to be found on the Thames foreshore. They were used to hold together garments, clothes, dresses, ruffs, and Tudor women in particular used to have hundreds and thousands of pins holding their corsets together, their dresses together, and Queen Elizabeth I used hundreds and hundreds to hold her outfits together. And a little bit of trivia too is that at one point they were so scarce and expensive that they were only sold 2 days of the year in January, and men and husbands used to give their wives and girlfriends money to go and buy pins, and apparently that is where the term pin money comes from. And then when pins became less scarce and less expensive, the term remained, and pin money was just used to buy other incidentals. So I quite like that little story of the origin of the term pin money. And here is the little pot of semi-precious gems, the garnets, and nobody knows really why they are to be found on the Thames foreshore. There's various ideas, various suggestions, but nobody really knows for sure. But you can still find them in amongst the stones if you look very, very carefully. There's such a large selection of pottery that was featured on today's video, and here we've got such a wide range spanning so many centuries, starting off with this Roman pottery here. I love this piece. It looks like it's come from the top of an urn or something, with that sort of feathered design. And this very basic design here as well. I particularly love this piece. I'll be taking it to the Museum of London to show them, to see what they can tell me about it. And we've got this candlestick here, which could very possibly be a lead glazed candlestick dating back to the 16th or 17th century. And then these little pieces of pottery that Ted was telling us about, tin glazed, Delft ware, slipware. And then coming into the 19th, 20th century, this pearlware, which I think is from Victorian times, and which I love to use actually to make fish with. I just think there's something about it that goes very well on a fish. And lastly, these Benllermine jugs, and I've got some fragments here of jugs which I found over the years, and this one features the face of the bearded man, of course Bartman jug, which they are also called. Bartman means bearded man, and the image of the bearded face is supposed to be linked to the mythical wild man creature. There he is there, looking rather wild and fierce. There's another example here. Got a scary face. There's part of his beard and his teeth. And a laughing mouth and his teeth. So you can understand why he might have originated from that mythical wild man. And we'll hear a little bit more about him in a moment. They were used often to hold beer or wine. This is a tiny one. They're 17th century stoneware. And this is tiny. It doesn't actually have a bearded man on it, but it's a perfect little example of the shape of a Bartman jug. Hi everyone, thank you very much for watching and for accompanying us along the foreshore today. I hope you enjoyed, and as usual, if you have any suggestions or ideas about any of the finds, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Before I go, I just wanted to read a little bit about the wild man featured on the Bartman jug, and I'm going to read it from Ted's book, The London in Fragments, A Mudlark's Treasures, and it's full of gems and information about things and objects that you find along the River Thames. So, the wild men were part human, but were possessed of unreasonable strength and terrible sexual energy, and were unable to control their animal urges. There's no pre-Christian record of the wild man, but he seems on a continuum with the green man. Turn the foliage into hair and the transition is complete, and shares with him a vitality sucked directly out of nature. So there you go. And he also talks a little bit about the Bartman jug and how it was used on occasions as what is known as a witch bottle. And he says here, emptied of their contents, Bartman jugs were used as witch bottles, filled with gruesome contents, urine, nail clippings, pins, and buried in the walls and floors of houses for protection. So there you go. So if you need a bit of protection, you now know what you need to do. And on that note, I'd like to wish you all a wonderful week. Thank you again for watching, and see you again very soon.